Hello everyone, welcome to COEX Talk. Today we have Ariadna Reyes, a very special friend, and she was also one of my professors at the University of Pennsylvania. We're very happy to have her here today to talk about the research and the work of Mario Molina. And we are super happy to have this opportunity to have her share her experiences, her knowledge about this important research. So Ariana, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you got involved in all these environmental profession and education in this field?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maria. It was a pleasure. It is a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be your instructor and now your friend and colleague. So I am Ariadna Reyes, and I'm currently a PhD and a professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. And I also serve as a researcher at the Centro Mario Molina. So I come from Mexico City. And so I get very inspired by Mario Molina when I was a child, because I remember that he won the Nobel Prize of Chemistry in 1995. I was a kid, and so ever since I got very interested in climate change and environmental issues. Perhaps because I live in Mexico City, one of the most, I want to say, one of the cities with the biggest challenge of air pollution, and so as a resident of Mexico City, you are always exposed to pollution, water issues, and that's why you get really interested. It's part of your daily life. And so, as I was mentioning before, Maria, so I am a civil and environmental engineer from Mexico City, and then I worked as a researcher at Centro Mario Molina because my master thesis was kind of an assessment of greenhouse gases in university colleges in Mexico City. So for some reason, I met researchers and I worked there for 5 years. And so at Centro Mario Molina, I developed the evaluation of sustainability in social housing in Mexico City. So as you may remember, so I did a lot of research on housing and transportation in Mexico City, just because in Mexico City, we commute a lot, like 4 hours. So I got really interested in issues of planning, transportation, climate change, and justice. So, and I want to say that Dr. Mario Molina, even though he was kind of the only Nobel Prize recipient in sciences from Mexico, so he was very humble and very incredibly nice and good person. And more importantly, I think his contribution today is that many of us, many children in Mexico got inspired by his research. And so, and I would argue that he saved the world. And because of him and his research, Mexico is kind of a leader of climate change policy in Latin America. So yeah, we owe a lot to Mario Molina. And so he recently passed in October 7th, 2020. So instead of, mentioning that, I just want to honor his life just by sharing with you guys what he did and what I learned from him. So this is me in 2012, by the way. And then, so I just want to talk a little bit about planetary boundaries, the legacy of Mario Molina, and how can we honor his legacy? Well, it's one of my takeaway. How can we honor his life today, given the very bad political environment that we have now? And so, first of all, as Mario Molina said, we already have technologies that can help us address climate change. So we have invented public transportation, all these technologies that can help us address climate change. However, there is an inequality in the planet. So we know that developed countries overly use resources, water, energy. People do not have any awareness of their consumption. On the other hand, we have countries of the global south with poor access to technologies. So there's like a huge inequality in terms of energy and water consumption. And so even though we have technologies, we cannot solve climate change because of these inequalities and injustices. So instead of thinking about technologies and, electric vehicles and these huge technological developments, so we need to address social justice, because we have millions of people with no access to water, electricity, and on the other hand, we have us using electricity and water without any considerations. And so as I was saying, human beings have been consuming water energy in ways that the planet cannot sustain. And at the same time, we have informal communities in the global south where people have no access to water, sanitation systems, and so many kids are exposed to pollution and exposed to sicknesses. So that's why I believe that, sustainable development cannot be addressed if we do not address poverty and hunger and inequality. And so I just want guys to describe the legacy of Mario Molina using this idea of social and planetary boundaries for sustainable development. So maybe you guys have been talking about what is sustainable development. And some people say, oh, it's an equilibrium between environment, economic development, and social issues. But unfortunately, many people think that sustainability is only the environment, and it's not. It goes way beyond the environment because, as I said before, many people do not have access to technologies. And so kind of what I want to say, guys, is that these are a representation of sustainable development. So just think about a donut. And so what I want to say is that we need to ensure social and environmental ceilings. So, and kind of this representation helped me describe the contribution of Mario Molina to climate change. So this is kind of a safe space for humanity. And as I said before, it's not only environmental, it's also social. So just think about all the people that do not have access to water, food, health, equality, energy, jobs, voice, resilience, education. And so, and then after that, we can go and see the environmental things too. And so just drawing on this idea of planetary boundaries. So I just want you to know, guys, that we have 9 essential processes that we need to maintain to have a stable planet, safe and sound. So what is that? So maybe you know about climate change. And so we need to ensure that we use resources in ways that we do not horribly harm these 9 planetary boundaries. So for example, fresh water, that you guys are very interested. Pollution, ocean acidification, etc. So however, because we have been consuming resources in ways that the planet cannot sustain, we have already crossed 3 planetary boundaries. What is that? Climate change, biodiversity loss, and nitrogen cycle. So we have been exacerbating the contribution of greenhouse gases and producing climate change in ways that are very harmful and threatening to us, guys. However, because of Mario Molina's research, thanks to him, we didn't cross 4. So we already crossed 3 planetary boundaries, but he helped us tackle ozone layer. So maybe you guys remember like 10 or 15 years ago, kind of this ozone layer depletion. I hope you remember that. And so because of him and his research, we were able to control this depletion of the ozone layer. So that's how important his work was. So why Mario Molina and many other researchers help us address some of the environmental issues that I was talking about? So just think about in the 60s in the US, after the Second World War, so kind of cities were growing super fast. A lot of people were moving to the suburbs. So kind of these cities, these American cities, were using a lot of petroleum oil to produce highways and cities. And more importantly, just think about when the population grew so rapidly. So like engineers were inventing like pesticides. And pesticides were producing a lot of pollution, not only to the water and soil, but also to the air. So kind of in the 60s and the 70s, like researchers like Mario Molina and also Rachel Carson were alarming the industries and saying pesticides, DDT are really harmful for the environment. You need to stop. And so that's how environmental movement grew and emerged. So that's, you guys are part of this environmental movement, but because of these scientists, we know about the effects of pesticides. So that's how important they are. And so Mario Molina was looking at the kind of the contribution of sprays, hair sprays, refrigerators, things that we use in our homes a lot. And what is the contribution to the kind of how they were exacerbating the ozone layer depletion. And you guys maybe, I don't know if you know what is the ozone layer. So kind of the ozone layer is kind of a layer that protects us from the solar radiation. Solar radiation is harmful for our bodies, right? We can get cancer, skin cancer. We can get a lot of exposure, the ecosystems struggle. So kind of the ozone layer is a planetary boundary that we shouldn't cross. Otherwise, we're gonna be having a lot of trouble. However, we knew that in the 70s, there was a hole in the Antarctica. And so Mario Molina helped us understand that. And so, but what he did, and I just wanna help you understand what he did and what he discovered. So this is the Earth. And then we have these clouds, and then you have the airplanes. So kind of these are the layers of the atmosphere. I just want you to think about that, layers, like a cake. So you have the Earth, and then you have the troposphere, stratosphere, and then you have the ozone layer. So when we were using sprays for our hair and refrigerators, these substances were kind of damaging the ozone layer here. And so it was so much the contribution of these substances that we end up doing a hole in the ozone layer. So I just want you to think about it. So that was the depletion of the ozone layer. And so kind of in the 70s, he and his professor at University of Berkeley, they were discovering this and they were trying to understand what happened. Why did we have a hole in the Antarctica that I want to exemplify here? So how we knew about this damage, it was because there was a hole in the ozone hole over Antarctica. And then, so Mario Molina and his colleagues discovered that the use of plastic foam and refrigerators damaged the ozone layer. And also pesticides that farmers use a lot to produce a lot of corn and products. And that reminds me your concerns about water. And so how we are, you know, the ways that human beings produce crops and food are so damaging for the environment, right? So just think about not only for water and pollution, also for the atmosphere. So these pesticides also like expose the atmosphere and create this ozone depletion. And so Mario Molina and colleagues revealed this damage to the ozone layer. And guess what? The industry, the refrigerators industry, the plastic industry were mad at him, obviously, because their products were damaging the atmosphere and the environment in ways that we cannot sustain. And so, however, he resisted, and that's the importance of his contribution. But sometimes we feel so helpless, I guess, that politicians do not hear us or we cannot change anything. Just like, I think we need to learn from his colleagues. They persisted. And so because of him and his research, so there was like a treaty, the Montreal Protocol. And just like after 10 years of environmental advocacy and environmental movements and, you know, protests and things like that, so kind of all the refrigerator foams were banned. Kind of, that's how we control the ozone layer depletion. So in many ways, he saved the world because you know, because of his research and their colleagues, we were able to understand the impacts of pesticides, refrigerators. I don't know if you remember, guys, when you were kids, or kind of the frosting in the refrigerators. These substances were so harmful for the environment, and we, all of us had it, and we didn't know. So that's how important it is to listen to scientists, like today, right, with COVID. And then, so anyway, so after, so 80s, 90s, 20s, after 40 years or something like that, because of this Montreal Protocol, kind of the ozone layer is recovering. And potentially the ozone layer is gonna be like well recovered in our lifetime, perhaps in the 2060s. So it's very good news, right? And so to me, like, what is the learning experience? It is kind of advocacy. It's what you are doing, just learning and pushing this. And so chemicals used in this are at risk of depleting the ozone and increasing climate change. So, but there is also very bad news for us. So even though we were able to control ozone depletion, we also still use air conditioning systems in our houses, right? In the US, like, we cannot live without air conditioning. And so still, these air conditioning that we use produce greenhouse gases. And these greenhouse gases are still contributing to climate change. So I think my objective in this talk is just to let you know the substances that we use every day and that are harming the environment. And so perhaps like architects like Maria, you know, if they help us design better homes that use less air conditioning, so there are good ways to mitigate climate change and ozone depletion, right? And so he received the Nobel Prize in 1995, as I said. And ever since, he carried out a lot of research in Mexico, and he kind of established a think tank on climate change policy. And he still also lives in the US, in San Diego, so he had like 2 homes. And so many people recognize his legacy. And so like he received the Medal of Honor by President Obama recently. And so kind of the planet is a better place because of Mario, as Al Gore said. Dr. Mario Molina never backed down from political pressure, even though the industries were mad at him, as I said. He never gave up, and people can make decisions and solve problems. So like, it's my message today. It's like, if we listen to the science and we kind of are able to make coalitions between industries, policymakers, scientists, universities, environmental groups, so we can really have a better future, yes. And so kind of coming back to this idea of the planetary boundaries, as I said, we were able to control depletion of ozone layer, but we still have 3 very bad challenges that we have crossed. So climate change, biodiversity loss, and nitrogen cycle. So we still use a lot of pesticides that are bad for the environment. And so kind of another contribution of Mario Molina was to understand that the substances that we use can also damage climate change and can also damage the ozone layer. So kind of we need to reframe the way we use buildings, the way we commute, just to meet the needs of all within the means of the planet. So instead of having a development that it is to, you know, to produce economic profits, we need to think about what is the planetary boundary. So instead, you know, it's what I always say in my classes, is like, it's not only enough to use less water. So we need to use the water that we can use. The planetary boundary is not what we want, it's what we have. And so I just want to say that this research of Mario Molina is very important also for climate change. And as I said before, many people doubt if climate change is produced by human beings. And so all the scientists have demonstrated that it is because of us that we are altering the atmosphere and the planetary boundary. So as you can see, guys, if you look at the 1950s, when the American cities grew very rapidly, so we have an increase of carbon dioxide, methane, and all these substances that harm the environment. And so also, just to finish the idea, is that we have been altering, we have been damaging, and we have been increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide in ways that never seen before. So just think about it. Just because of this grew and this increase in the use of energy, water resources, we have been altering the concentration of carbon dioxide. And so just look at the concentration of carbon dioxide in the 1950s, as I'm showing here, and how it has been growing over time. So now we are 411 parts per million. And as you know, climate change have increased 1 Celsius, the global temperature of our planet. You remember that, right? So, and only with 1 Celsius increase of global warming, guys, we have more hurricanes, we have more floods. And so, and just think about what is gonna happen in the decades to come. It's very alarming, guys. So that's why kind of the current policy is trying to kind of help people change the ways they consume energy. So instead of having an increase of 6 Celsius degrees, which would be devastating for all of us, we want to have only an increase of 1.5. I don't know if that makes sense, guys, to you, but I just wanna let you know that we are living in very difficult times, and if we don't change the way we live and consume, it's gonna be super terrifying for the next generations. And so this is one of the policies that Mario Molina wanted to have for us, is that controlling and reducing the use of energy, so the global temperature only increased 1.5 Celsius degrees instead of 6 Celsius degrees. So that's one of the things that he was pushing. And so how can we honor Dr. Mario Molina legacy? That's how I wanna finish today. It's just to remember that we need to have environmental ideas and advocacy. I agree, but also we need to think about the people. And you guys, perhaps we are mad at the people that use energy in ways that are irrational, but there are many people that do not have access to electricity, and that's very unfair. So one of the things I really wanna share with all the people that I collaborate with, to put people at the center, low-income families, people in developing countries. And then because as I was mentioning, if we can see sustainable development, but we have millions of people that don't have access to food, water, income, resilience, voice, jobs, energy, so we will not have sustainable development. And so I also wanna say that I already said that we have been doing a poor performance of environmental issues. So we haven't been able to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, water pollution, but we have been even worse in terms of social issues. So the social issues are terrible, are really bad. So just talking about the planet. So as I said, there are many people that don't have access to education, that do not have an income to sustain their lives, people that don't have access to water, food, health, gender equality. So you guys know, like even in Mexico, even in Latin America, so women do not have the same abilities and opportunities than men. So that's also part of sustainability. Equity, racism is also part of sustainability. If we have a racist society, so we have less opportunities for low-income people of color. And so I just want to finish, guys, just telling you that if politicians really want to tackle poverty and climate change, there could be a way. And so just imagine, so there are studies that have shown that we can end hunger for all if we use 1% of the global food supply. So that's how crazy it is for sustainable development. Just think about all the food that we waste every day. And then, so just wanna say you guys, I wanna tell you guys that it is quite easy to address poverty if we really wanna make a difference. If it was a global effort to do that, we only need 1% to end hunger for all. And also, like, if, as I said, there are many people in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia that do not have access to electricity, whereas us, we are using electricity like irrationally or in ways that the planet cannot sustain. But if we wanna have everybody with access to electricity, we only need 1% of global carbon dioxide emissions. And also like we can end income poverty for all if we like invest 0.2% of global income. So what I want to say is that if we want to honor the environmental and social advocacy of people like Mario Molina and others, like we have to build coalitions between governments and policymakers. Just to finish, guys, and just thinking about what Mario Molina and other researchers will want to is to address climate change in ways that are effective. And so, yeah, just want to say, guys, that the US is the second contributor to climate change in the world. And so first is China, but because China have too many people, but yeah. US by all means is the second place. I have to finish now?
No. I was saying, yes, that China has a big population compared to the US.
Exactly. It's not that the Chinese like use more energy per capita, right? It's like the US, even though it's a smaller country, like 320 million people, whereas China, 1,000 million. So it's still we, and also India, so just look at India. India is the second largest. So that doesn't mean that India is having the quality of life that we have here, but because of the amount of people. But guess what? The US is the only country that haven't ratified and that they withdrew the Paris Agreement. So the US, even though is the second largest contributor or the largest, if you do it per capita, they all, President Trump withdrew. And then, as I said, what left? And so I just want to finish with this idea of what can you do to address climate change. And I know this is in the US. And so what you can do is to change the way you commute. Just think about transportation. It's something that we always talk about in the class, right? So just thinking about El Paso, Texas. So you guys do not have access to transportation, like, or it is not very easy to walk. So
and also the culture is another thing. Like people here love to have big trucks and a lot of cars per household. And because we don't have access, people tend to lean towards that direction instead of saying, hey, well, I want to reduce my transportation and the way I commute. Like it's hard on both ends, like the lack of education on the subject and the access to it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And also like just think about how cheap
and the climate too.
The gasoline is so cheap, right? But you know, like I am more hopeful of Mexico and developing countries because at least in Mexico City, by the way, I want to clarify, we have good access to transportation, right? And then, so as I have seen, and I teach the class on transportation, and I say that, and I'm proud of this, like 70% of the people in Mexico City use public transportation or walk, and only like 12% use an automobile. So you see like how different it is. So there is hope. And so we in Philadelphia, we enjoy public transportation better, right? More compact cities. Anyway, so if you want to make a difference, I understand that El Paso is very poorly designed for pedestrians. But if you want to make a difference, carpooling, right? I don't know, like, or perhaps, or use a bike. I don't know, like depends on your quality of life and your decisions. But you know, like 30% of the contribution to the US is related to cars. And you guys, 90% of the population in the US use an automobile to commute. Is very high.
Right.
And more importantly, they go solos, so they drive alone. Anyway, second one is electricity. And this is part of the architects. So we have these architects that is very important that they design better buildings, right? More efficient. So people do not have to use electricity. And then also, like, obviously, technologies are very important, but you know, my thing with technologies, guys, is that low-income families do not have access to technologies. So like, this is very horrible to say that whereas we are using too much electricity, some people do not have electricity, or they are burning wood or using diesel and you know, exposing themselves to pollution, and also industry, agriculture, residential. And so what just to conclude, this is the last one, I think, is if we want to really support the legacy of a researcher like him, we need to think about energy, technology, water, as you guys are very interested, but also think about this one: zero hunger, no poverty, good health and well-being, quality of education, gender equality. Because we cannot actually ask a low-income family to reduce their consumption if they do not have
consumption.
That's my point. So if we have more equal society, I think it's going to be more effective to have a sustainable development and tackle climate change. And as I just want to conclude, guys, so Mario Molina help us address the ozone layer depletion. And so, it is very important to push the scientists. And I don't know, how do you feel about Mario Molina now that you know his legacy more?
A true hero. No, I remember when I was in elementary school, we talked a lot about the ozone layer, and I knew about this hole, but I was too little to understand this. And I feel very motivated and proud that a Mexican, that just one person did this huge change, because sometimes being in this field feels overwhelming and feels like you're just a little one person doing a lot of things most of the times. And he's reminding us to keep on working and keep on moving, and that those things do happen, that there's one person that can have this effect on the planet. Also, I wanted to ask you, if there was a person that doesn't know anything about it, and you kind of get asked, what do you really would advise a person that doesn't know anything about the environment to start doing a change? Will that be in transportation, or would that be their food habits, or what would you advise?
Yeah, actually, I'm having a class of sustainable communities, and my students are working on food. And so we are looking at, just to consume local food. And sometimes we end up being greenwashed. You remember that?
Yes.
If it is environmentally responsible, but for me, it is much better to buy food in Juarez, Ciudad Juarez, that is more local, and that is maybe indigenous communities, harvested or whatever, than going to Whole Foods. If I didn't have the opportunity to talk about informal communities, but I do my research in informal communities, and I always center my research of sustainability with poor communities. But just talking about El Paso, I know it's very hard to change, but I think that you guys can do a lot if you reduce the consumption of electricity for air conditioning and heating, with architecture. So perhaps use technologies like we did in the class. And however, even though we have the most sustainable house, if we keep doing and having very big trucks, I think that is a little bit of everything, the way you eat. So for example, it's very simple. Instead of eating meat that produces a lot of methane, right? Or cow. I know it's very delicious, but maybe you eat rabbit, that it has much less impact in the environment, and consume food from Juarez. It would be more sustainable, I believe, that going to Whole Foods, I swear. Because think about the transportation of the food. If you organic food from Peru, just imagine the transportation from Peru to here, right? I don't know, that's why I believe in life cycle assessment. Just think about the origin to the end, right? What is better for us? And I believe that, it's a little bit of everything. If you can bike, if you can share your car, if you can reduce electricity consumption by using solar panels, I think it's good. And sure, is what you're doing. No?
Yes, currently I think one of our projects right now is that is like very focused on these things is the community garden, because number one, we've been like having the opportunity to connect with our food source. Number two, we're not using herbicides and pesticides. There's a food scarcity here, like finding locally grown food here in El Paso is very difficult. I just did a research on farmers market, and there's very few. And then this other friend did research, and she said that on the farmers market they do sell products, but not a lot of produce, like not a lot of vegetables and fruits. So it is a big problem here. So I think as members of the community, it's a great opportunity that we're doing this, because it's not only affecting the planet, but these pesticides we're eating, and it's affecting our health. And how many people really know this? And it's something that looks so simple, and it's a lot of work, right, Claudia and Ana? It's tough work, but it's rewarding to know that you're having a little impact on your community that way.
Oh yeah, like urban farms, I think that one of the most meaningful ways to reduce climate change and also adapt to climate change. So that if we don't have access to water anymore or energy, so you are preparing for the impact of climate change. That's what you're doing is, I think, is the most meaningful way. Because in El Paso, maybe a food desert, right? Remember that the concept that, you know, like the way that American cities are. So that's why I'm more hopeful of Juarez, I believe, because in Juarez, at least you have a lot of tienditas, right?
Yes.
Everywhere, so people can walk and consume.
Yeah.
But in the US, we have only residential, very strict, right? I don't know.
Does anyone else have any questions for Ariadna? Or want to comment on any of the great information she shared with us today?
Well, I mean, yeah, when it comes to the community garden, that was very hard labor. But yeah, there's a couple of things that you obviously like mentioned that I like didn't even think of. Like, I know that here in El Paso, one of the biggest issues is obviously going to be transportation. Unfortunately, like, how can we make it? Because it's like a long piece of land. So hopefully there's something that they can come up with. And because I think we would be very open to using that transportation if it were provided, if that makes any sense. Because if you go on a bike from the east side to the west side, you're probably going to get there dehydrated, especially in this weather. But no, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this information. I mean, again,
my pleasure.
Maria had told me a little bit about it, so I was very excited to like hear about it.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that I want to add is like with all this information.
And it's amazing that you actually keep.
Oh, it's cutting a little bit.
Yes. Anna, we couldn't hear what you said at the end. I think she froze.
Yeah, she did.
I think one of the things that I would like to suggest to every person that
oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not.
Oh, sorry. That is watching this conversation and that is here, that joined today, is like, with this information, how are you gonna go from here? Like, what are you gonna do? What's the next step? Like, for me as a designer, maybe putting more energy into that community garden and finding new ways of connecting more people. So what's the next step? Because there's a lot of information out there, but there's very few people that actually do something with that information. The science is great, but where you take that science to is what really matters, because you want to make sure what's Mario, I forgot his last name.
Mario Molina.
Mario Molina. I was going to say Moreno. Mario Molina he didn't end up with the science in his hands. He actually said, I'm going to do these things to change policy and to change things, how things are being done. So I think it should be a good way to reflect on what else can you do as a human to change that.
Yeah. And also one of his legacies that I didn't say, it was a lot of environmental education. So he wrote a book on climate change for kids. I think that was his last piece. And that was very, very nice to see book for children. So it's to educate the next generation. And as he inspired me and many others, like I believe you get inspired. And
Yo quiero decir algo. ¿Puedo decir algo?
Sí.
Eso que acabas de decir es precisamente lo que iba a decir. La educación, o sea, porque todo lo que fuiste relacionando en el círculo, pues sí, pero todo yo creo que depende de la educación. Y si la educación no se la damos desde que están chiquitos, es bien difícil cambiar ya cuando la gente esté grande, y te lo digo por experiencia propia. Sí, y qué padre ahorita que dices que Mario Molina hizo un libro para ir educando a las siguientes generaciones, porque pues sí, yo que trabajo mucho en la comunidad en Juárez y con comunidades en extrema pobreza, pues es bien difícil sacarlos de su entorno, de su manera de vivir, por más que les lleves y les enseñes, pues ya es mucho más difícil que cuando están los niños chiquitos, enseñarles sobre todos estos temas. Creo que es muy, muy importante. Muchas gracias, me encantó tu plática.
Gracias, Marta. Sí, definitivamente por eso que la desigualdad que hay en el país, ¿no?
Ajá, en todos lados.
Es muy importante. La sustentabilidad debe ser también social. Esa es una de las cosas que social. Si no tenemos el piso igual, yo pienso que México a veces es muy igual. A veces hay educación pública, pero a veces no. Sobre todo comunidades indígenas quedan olvidadas. Por eso yo siempre le digo a María, lo más importante es lo social, porque lo social está muy mal, está peor que lo ambiental. Si hemos hecho mal trabajo en ambiental, socialmente hemos hecho peor.
Sí.
Pero fíjate que a lo mejor los indígenas de cierta manera no eran por ejemplo, tanta basura y a lo mejor por su manera de ser, pero no son tan inconscientes.
No.
Pero la clase media baja en México, yo creo que es una de las partes en las que todos los gobiernos se deben de enfocar, porque vas a las colonias, sobre todo, mira, por ejemplo, en Juárez, que hay mucha gente que no es de Juárez, y en la colonia donde trabajamos es gente de Torreón, de Veracruz, de Zacatecas, y es impresionante que comen y la basura en la calle, avientan lo que comen. Tenemos un parque, a cada rato tenemos que estarlo pintando porque lo grafitean, y digo, es un parque en todo, y yo creo que esto se generaliza en todo México. Es el tratar de educar a la gente a que cuiden, a que sean más responsables con lo que tienen, porque no les importan, compren los vasos de elote y el vaso ahí lo avientan. Entonces yo creo que a mí se me hace que es la sociedad en la que más debemos de enfocarnos a tratar de hacer un cambio.
Sí, definitivamente. Yo por ejemplo, he trabajado con comunidades informales, que es mi y siempre lo que hacemos, que yo he visto que a veces se tira la basura, les digo, pues, si tú no tienes cariño por tu comunidad, no vas a hacer nada, ¿no? Como que lo que trato de hacer es, por eso somos planeadores urbanos, ¿no? Que es la comunidad, es cómo voy a tirar basura en mi casa, ¿no? Entonces, eso es una labor también que hay que hacer como yo digo, activistas, es darles ese por la igual en otra plática vamos a hablar sobre eso, que hice una campaña ambiental, hicimos una campaña ambiental en una comunidad muy pobre, y había mensajes como, si tiras la basura te va a dar Zika, o digo, que ese amor a la comunidad es lo que debemos hacer.
Exacto.
Bueno, yo sé que es difícil, pero por eso yo pienso que las siguientes generaciones van a ser mejores que nosotros.
Sí. Tenemos que hacer muy buen trabajo para dejar eso preparado.
¿Tienes sobrina? Acabo de tener un sobrino también. Lo voy a hacer un environmental champion.
Sí, los obligamos. Bueno, ¿alguien más tiene una pregunta? ¿No? Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias, Ariadna. Te vamos a volver a invitar para que nos platiques más cosas porque ya sé que
Sí.
tienes mucho que compartir y nosotros tenemos mucho que transmitirle a nuestra comunidad del Paso y a todas las personas que nos han estado siguiendo. Te agradezco mucho y honro la vida de Mario Molina y la tuya también.
Ah,
Que
gracias.
sigas haciendo muy
Gracias.
bonito trabajo. Fuiste una de mis maestras favoritas.
Gracias. Y tú igual, la verdad.
Bueno,
Muchas gracias y pues ojalá que los pueda ver un día en El Paso. A mi esposo
sí,
viene.
nos hablas cuando vengas.
Ok, muchas gracias. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.